the game. And him being a dual threat is a big part of what adds to his mystique, and it's a part of his brand. So I can understand the desirability of doing that as long as possible. But that being said, if it becomes apparent that he's just having continuous injury problems and everything, then I don't think that it will be the best thing for his long-term career interest to be the two-way player that we all know and love. I think that I would much rather have a one-dimensional Shohei Ohtani for as long as we can get him than him be a two-way player but be out of the league in like 3 to 4 years just because he keeps having elbow injuries. This is his second Tommy John surgery. He had his first one in 2018 after his first season with the Angels, and from what the reports are saying, this one's more serious than the first one, so hopefully he will be able to recover, and when he does resume pitching in 2025, for his sake, I hope that he's able to come out in full force. As a Braves fan, I hope that he doesn't come out in full force in the playoffs if we happen to run into him. But, I mean, with Shohei, with Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, the Dodgers were already looking dangerous. Now they're looking deadly. So let's just hope if they do make the playoffs next year that 1 week break between the playoffs and their first round matchup doesn't bite them in the tail like it did this year. Now, in other major news, the Lakers won the NBA preseason or in-season tournament. They won against the Pacers in a monster game with AD dropped 41 points, had 20 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 blocks. So a dominant night all around for him. That's the AD that the Lakers need. That's the AD that I wish we could see more consistently. And LeBron and AD combined had 31 rebounds against the Pacers, which is the same amount of rebounds the entire Pacers team had. So, I mean, it was just complete domination of the Pacers. LeBron won the tournament MVP, so that's just one more trophy that he can add to his trophy shelf. Now, the only downside, it's not even really a downside, it's just disappointing, is that for all the talk around this in-season tournament, there's no real basketball repercussions for it. I mean, each winning player and coach gets $500,000. LeBron is a billionaire, so for him, that's a drop in the bucket. And for what it's worth, I believe the lowest player on the Lakers is a rookie named Maxwell Lewis, who's making $1.1 million. So, I mean, for him, he's pretty much getting double his salary, which is great. That's life-changing money. Wouldn't begrudge him that at all. But from a basketball standpoint, like, what was the point of the tournament? And the way it was billed was that it would make the regular season more exciting. And, I mean, unless you're just so invested in these teams that you care about the individual players' financial well-beings, I don't really see what the excitement was. I mean, winning the tournament certainly helped the Lakers' record, but if they would have just played well in a regular season schedule, it would have helped their record the same amount. So, I mean, I don't really get anything out of it. I don't imagine any of the viewers got anything out of it other than watching some basketball games, which is what we would have got anyways. So hopefully next year, if they're going to keep up with this in-season tournament thing, they can actually put some stakes on the line. And for what it's worth, the Pacers all got $2,000 each. So, I mean, it does. If you're a player, I would play my tail off for $500K if I was Maxwell Lewis. But aside from that, I would like to see some type of maybe playoff states, maybe do it later in the season and have the tournament be made out of all the top contending teams outside of the 1 and the 2 seed. Or, I mean, if it's close, maybe even the 1 and the 2 seed. But just make it like a playoffs earlier on and to see how that impacts the win-loss column. And I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but there are a lot of cool stuff I think they could do with the concept that they didn't do this year. This was the first time they did it, so hopefully they can expand on it going forward. Now, we're just jumping all over the place as far as topics go, but I do think that these are the most interesting topics going on right now, so don't begrudge me that. This is my show. But Bill Belichick, he is approaching, I believe, some type of contract extension renewal this weekend, and everybody, not this weekend, this off season, but everybody's talking about what does the future hold for Bill Belichick, and he's the general manager and the head coach for the Patriots, so he does hold two different positions. But I would have to imagine that his future would entail either continuing in both of those positions or neither of those positions, just because when you've been having both hats as long as Belichick has, I can't imagine him taking a downgrade in one way or the other. So Belichick's 71 years old. The Patriots are 3-10. They haven't really done anything since Tom Brady left. Arguably, they didn't do anything his last season there either. But I mean, a first round playoff out is still a playoff appearance. But it's just been nothing but struggles the last couple years, and you can really tell that the media is great at building people up just to knock them down, because for all of the talk about Belichick being the GOAT, how he's arguably the one most responsible for the dynasty, you don't see that talk as much anymore. But that was the narrative for a while. It's like now that he's struggling with his team so much, all the vultures are out trying to relish in this man's downfall. So they had Gronk and Julian Edelman on Fox Sports this week and asked them, as former players with, I would imagine, a lot of ties to the Patriots organization, what they think the future holds for Bill. Gronk said he thinks that Bill will be around for the next few years, but Edelman wasn't convinced. He says he could very much see a world we live in which Belichick is not on the Patriots next season, which would be unthinkable for a lot of people. I mean, Belichick's been with the Patriots my entire life. It would just, it'd be weird seeing a Patriots game without the scowling, chubby dude with the cut-off sweatshirt sitting there barking orders into his headphone. But that could be a world we live in. I mean, on that same token, I couldn't have imagined Tom Brady playing for another team besides the Patriots, and we got to see that, so you can never say never in sports. But another former player, not for Belichick, his name is Bart Scott. He was a 4-year Jets player, went on Barstool to talk about how much he hates Bill Belichick. He said that his hatred for Belichick comes from issues that don't relate to football, but whatever it was that made them have disagreements with each other, it is very clearly personal for Mr. Scott, because he said on Barstool that he would let Bill burn if he was on fire. So, Belichick, if you don't start winning some football games in the upcoming future, you're going to get a lot more hate than you're getting now. It's the way it goes. But I really don't know what benefit there is to him to be able to prolong his career if he's not playing meaningful football. Because if you're a 6-time Super Bowl champion coach, I can't imagine he would want to prolong his career just to continue to be on a 3-10 team. And I'm not saying he's going to retire, because on that same token, the hard work and drive that made him a 6-time Super Bowl champion coach won't let him be a 71-year-old sitting at home watching Andy Griffith watering his garden type of person either. And it's just an interesting dilemma that he finds himself in. Now, from a general manager standpoint, if I'm Robert Kraft, I would keep Belichick for as long as you can. I mean, say what you will about the last couple seasons, he is still the greatest football coach this side of Vince Lombardi. I mean, a lot of people say he's the GOAT. I don't know enough about Vince Lombardi to debate that in as much detail as that debate deserves, but they're certainly the top two. So, I mean, I think when you have somebody like that, you can I would keep Bill Belichick for as long as you can. And guess what? If you struggle for the next couple of seasons and you say, oh, well, it was a bad idea in hindsight. But, I mean, I just think the level of expertise and skill that Belichick brings is always valuable. And when you get rid of a franchise player like Tom Brady, the future is always going to be hard for a little bit. I mean, heck, after Michael Jordan, it took 10 years for the Bulls to be able to become competitive again, and it took drafting Derrick Rose. And I mean, say what you will about the Patriots' struggles, at least Belichick has been able to provide some consistency in the locker room and help the franchise weather the post-Brady years. I think he still has just as good an eye for talent as any other coach in the league. And if the problem is talent, then I don't see what getting a new coach helps, because there's no way that that new coach, whoever it might be, would be able to maximize out of poor talent as much as a coach the stature of Bill Belichick could. And I mean, you can certainly argue that Belichick is benefiting from a reputation that he established years ago, and that as a businessman, Robert and Jonathan Kraft have to look at him as he is now and not what he has done. But, I mean, I understand the argument, and I get it. I just think that the risk of getting rid of Belichick and putting that level of insight and wisdom and potential in the retirement home, or even worse, sending him to go be with another franchise just because you had a couple bad seasons after 20 years of success, isn't the smartest move. That's just me, though. Now, staying in the world of football, the Ravens have been by far the best team as of late. At the very least, are the best team in the AFC. They've got a 10-3 record. They beat the Rams today, who have just been piddling since they won the Super Bowl. It's really sad to see how far they've fallen. They're just 6-7 mediocrity at its finest. But they were able to take the Ravens to overtime, so you got to give them credit for that. But the Ravens won 37-31 and continue to roll on. Lamar Jackson and Odell both had great games. Odell got 4 receptions for almost 100 yards. Lamar threw 3 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but he also rushed for 70 yards and just all out had a good game. I'm glad to see Odell being able to stay somewhat healthy this season. I don't want to jinx him just because of how the last couple of years have gone for him, but I hope they can make a show of it in the playoffs. I mean, I've been hoping to see Lamar and Mahomes turn into an actual dominant rivalry, the level of like this generation's Brady and Manning. But so far, it just hasn't panned out because the Ravens haven't been able to acquire any postseason success. If they continue rolling like they are this year, there's a good chance that they can get that. I would say to this point in his career, the biggest rival quarterback-wise in the AFC Mahomes has had has been Joe Burrow, and the Bengals are absolutely awful this year. So there's no chance that we get to see that rivalry repeat itself again in the playoffs this year. So I'm hoping to see Lamar pick up some slack, and I hope we get to see a Chiefs-Ravens matchup in the playoffs. And I mean, the Dolphins right now are currently better than the Chiefs too. I just think that the Chiefs' playoff credentials, their championship charisma, will benefit them in the postseason. And even if their record doesn't reflect the fact that they're a top team or top 2 team in the AFC, I think in the playoffs, their deep runs will make a big difference. we'll have to see what holds more weight. Taylor Swift and celebrity girlfriends seeming to always hamper their guys' team in sports or championship experience. Now over in the NFC, the Eagles are still by far and away the best team. I'm expecting to see the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl. I hope so. I mean, I'm still gonna bet right now on an Eagles-Chiefs rematch, but if one of those teams isn't gonna make it, I think it's gonna be the Chiefs. I could easily see Ravens and Eagles Super Bowl, and I think that would be a lot of fun too. Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson. I'd love to watch that matchup. But aside from the Eagles, I would say the biggest contenders right now in the NFC are the Cowboys. Now they are having a tough spot because they're in the Eagles division, which might not reflect great on them, or the 49ers, but I think confidently the Eagles are making the Super Bowl. And if I had to make a Super Bowl prediction now, which I'm going to, I think the Eagles will win and be able to bring Philadelphia its second Super Bowl in, was it like 7 years, which is pretty good for a team that had one of the longest playoff droughts of all time, I believe. I remember in 2017 when they beat the Patriots, everybody was 2017 season, 2018 Super Bowl. I hate how the NFL playoff timing works because it always throws the years off like that. Same way with the national championship in football, but is what it is. I remember how emotional the city of Philadelphia was after winning that Super Bowl, and I think they might have good reason to celebrate again this year, barring any unfortunate and unforeseen injuries. Now over back into the basketball world, Joel Embiid recently sounded off about the departure of Ben Simmons a couple years ago, and he said that he thinks Ben Simmons will go down as the one who got away in his career just because they were unable to make it work with them together on the 76ers and make a deep playoff run. Now, I have to disagree with Mr. Embiid here just based off of how poorly Ben Simmons has done since he left the 76ers. I mean, I don't think he's played a game this season. He averaged 6.9 points a game last season and only played half the schedule. He has just been unreliable when he's on the, as far as when he's available to play. He's had injuries. He's had, I don't know, mental issues, I guess you could say. He's anxiety, depression, issues like that, which is unfortunate. I hope that he can get that stuff sorted out. But from a basketball standpoint, I don't know if Joel Embiid should really be hanging his hat on Ben Simmons as the one that got away, because I don't see any of that changing had he stayed in Philadelphia versus going to Brooklyn. I mean, if anything, I think it might have got exacerbated because there was very good reason why he left Philadelphia in the first place. It was after that pitiful playoff series where Doc Rivers was criticizing Simmons. Even Joel Embiid was having some not subtle jabs. I mean, he was being honest. There was that famous moment where Ben Simmons passed up on an open layup or something to that effect. And they asked Embiid after the game what made all the difference. And he very truthfully pointed that out. And Ben Simmons took that some type of way. And, I mean, to me, that's just not a very healthy environment for two top-tier teammates to have when you can't be honest in your assessment of a game at the risk of hurting your co-star's feelings. I mean, there's a lot to be said about, you're supposed to keep those type of criticisms in-house, but not at the expense of your own credibility, because that was very clearly a decision maker in that game. And for Embiid not to call it out or mention it would have just been silly, in my opinion. But I think that Embiid needs to focus on his 76ers and what he's got now instead of wistfully longing to the days of Ben Simmons, when his days with Ben Simmons are probably more rose-tinted glasses than anything that were actually productive to winning in his career. I mean, his 76ers are doing pretty good right now. They're fourth seed in the Eastern Conference, 14-17. They're only 2 games back from the first seed, which are the Celtics right now at 16-5. I think the Celtics have been able to cut themselves a cut above the rest this season, even if they're only 1 game ahead of the Magic in the schedule. And the Magic have just been the team to take the league by surprise. I mean, I think they were an 8th seed last year or something like that in the playoffs, and now they're all the way up to the 2 seed. So if I had to guess, that's probably the highest the Magic have been seeded in the playoffs since Dwight Howard left, which has been over 10 years at this point. So more power to the Magic. I hope they can continue the run they've been on. It's always good to get some new blood into the upper echelons of sports leagues. Now over in the Western Conference, I know I mentioned the Lakers as the in-season tournament champions, and one reflection of why that tournament means nothing is they're still just the 5th seed against the Timberwolves, who are the 1st seed, 17-4. They are 3 games above the Thunder, who are in 2nd place. Now, looking at standings, it's very clear that the Eastern Conference is just the best conference in basketball right now. They have, aside from the Timberwolves, the 4th seed in the East is tied with the 2nd seed in the West. And the drop-off between the 2nd seed and the 4th seed in the East, it's pretty steep. So I'm pretty confident that whoever the Western Conference sent out is to the NBA Finals, they're probably going to have a tough time. I mean, it's early in the season, but the Nuggets, who were last year's champions, have been pretty disappointing. The Clippers, since James Harden has gotten there, have not panned out at all. Right now, they're on the outside looking into the playoffs at 11-10. Even though they've actually been doing pretty good recently, they've won, I think, 4 out of their last 5. And maybe that means things are finally starting to click with them. But James Harden is averaging 15 points a game right now, which is the lowest he's averaged in years. He got 12, 7, and 8 yesterday. And I mean, that's typically, I think, what his default is now, is he's very much like a low-level triple-double player, in that he'll get you he just did 12, 7, 8, 10, 10, and 10 is essentially the default stat line for him. He might get you a little bit more, he might get you a little bit less, maybe 15, 10, and 10. I'll be generous and say that. But he's at the point now where I think you can take the phrase NBA star James Harden and say NBA role player James Harden. Now, that's not to take away what he's done in the past. He is certainly one of the 75 greatest players of all time and easily a top 10 shooting guard of all time. But as of right now, he is past his prime. Now, the other big trade that happened earlier this season was Damian Lillard to the Bucks, and that has been holding up a lot better than James Harden to the Clippers. The Bucks right now are the 3rd seed in the West or in the East with a 14-7 record, and Damian Lillard has been doing pretty solid himself. he has been averaging 25 points a game, and he actually got 32 last week against the Heat, though he's had some injury issues. He's been missing games every now and then, nothing too serious, just the average nicks and bruises that pro athletes get from time to time. On that same note, though, that's not something that will give you a lot of confidence if you're a Bucks fan going forward, because playoff basketball is not known for being easy on the body. So if he's getting a couple nicks and crannies and missing a couple games now, that doesn't bode well for the playoffs. Hopefully, he can use a couple of games to rest. I'm not suggesting load management, but I don't know. To me, load management is just missing games, stretches of games for no reason other than just because you don't feel like doing it. And if he wanted to sit out one game or two games the month before the playoffs just to rest, I think that's different than consistently doing it throughout the season. But Dame Lillard's health is the priority for the Bucks this season. Giannis, their star, has been going off. He's averaging 30 points a game. If he can continue at his current pace, I would say he's the current favorite for the NBA MVP right now, just the way he's been playing. It's completely out of his mind. The record matches it. If he can get a deep postseason run, then it'll just be a great boost for his legacy. I mean, I hope to see Giannis and Jokic get to face each other down in the playoffs, but I really don't know how likely that's looking, because I don't think Jokic will be able to hold up his end of the bargain. The Nuggets, like I said earlier, are like 14-9, something like that. Middle of the pack. Jokic himself has been doing solid, but the rest of the team, not so much. He's currently averaging almost a triple-double. He's at 28 points, 13 rebounds, 9.6 assists. So I guess that rounds up to a triple-double, but not quite in my book, at least. But per the NBA.com MVP ladder, Joel Embiid is currently the favorite, and he might be as far as numbers go. But whenever it comes down to it, it's always the team record that carries the most weight in the NBA MVP voting, unless you do something historic. And I don't picture the 76ers doing anything too historic, or Joel Embiid doing anything too historic. The only time, at least that I can remember, in the last 10 years that somebody has won an MVP without being a top 3 seeded team is when Russell Westbrook became the first player to average a triple-double since Oscar Robertson. So at the moment, Giannis, despite what the NBA.com says, has to be the MVP favorite. Now, going on to wrestling, CM Punk cut on Friday the promo that everybody was hoping to get from him on Monday. He went out there on Monday. His promo time got cut short because he was unable to get out in time before a commercial. Basically, a match before him went long, and there was a commercial that came up, and he only ended up getting 7 minutes to talk, where he was originally supposed to get like 10 to 15, I think. So he had to rush his promo. He said a lot of stuff that a lot of people weren't very happy to hear him say. He was talking about how he was home, how WWE meant the world to him, all this stuff that basically contradicts everything he said publicly about the company over the last 10 years since he's been gone. So Friday he came out and he was the good old controversial CM Punk. He was making references to his situation in AEW. he was talking about Kevin Owens, and him and Kevin Owens have had very public beef with each other going back to their days 15, 16 years ago in Ring of Honor. And so there's been a lot of backstage reports talking about people who are not happy CM Punk is back. And Kevin Owens is more often than not one of the names that is reported at the top of that list. And so Punk took a jab both at those rumors and at AEW by talking about how people are wondering if him and Kevin Owens can coexist in the same locker room. But he said it's 2023 and people don't have backstage fights in the locker room. That's just crazy. Now, unfortunately for the crowd reaction, not unfortunate, but it was tribute to the troops on Friday, which is a great thing that WWE has been doing since, I believe, 2003. They, go have a show for all the servicemen and women. They used to do it over in the Middle East. I think now that the war overseas is less prominent, they began to do it stateside and just invite service members to come. But because of that, a lot of the audience members weren't exactly in tune with all of the backstage drama, especially about CM Punk, that they weren't aware to the same level that an arena full of regular wrestling fans would have been. So a lot of the quote unquote money lines in CM Punk's promo didn't land as well just because of the audience they were in. But it is what it is. On the whole, great of WWE to continue to do tribute for the troops. They used to always make those really loaded shows back in the day. I mean, they really don't hype them up like they used to. I didn't even realize they still did tribute to the troops until I watched CM Punk's promo on Friday and noticed all of the decor they had up around the ring for it. But he called out Roman Reigns. He said that he planned on going to WrestleMania, taking Roman Reigns' championship, and to steal a phrase from Cody Rhodes, he wanted to finish his story and main event WrestleMania and win the WWE title. Now, when it comes to who gets to finish their story at WrestleMania, will it be CM Punk or Cody Rhodes? It needs to be Cody Rhodes. I mean, CM Punk coming back is great, but it does not have to be at the expense of Cody Rhodes' story, which has been building for 2 years now and should have finished at this year's WrestleMania and would have, I believe, if it wasn't for the fact that WWE knew they were going to sell the company. And so they wanted Roman Reigns to be the one holding the championship when that sale went down. If it wasn't for that, I think Cody Rhodes would be WWE Championship champion right now. And they can't put that story off again. Because if Cody doesn't win the championship at this year, at WrestleMania, then his story's, for all intents and purposes, dead. And I'd hate to see that because it's one of the most compelling stories that's been going in wrestling in years. I mean, it's got a lot of people reinvested in wrestling that hadn't been in a long time. So I hope they prioritize Cody Rhodes and his story over CM Punk and his. And I don't think those two stories have to be mutually exclusive. I think they can overlap. To me, if I were booking it, both of CM Punk and Cody Rhodes have already entered themselves into the Royal Rumble. What needs to happen is they need to be the last two entrants in the Royal Rumble. And they need to have a 10-minute singles match, basically like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels did in 2007, where Cody just manages to be the better man on that night and throw Punk over the top rope. Afterwards, they have a stare down. Cody gets on the turnbuckle, points to the WrestleMania sign, and you keep them apart for a while. And that plants the seeds later on down the line after Cody Rhodes beats Roman for the championship. He can work a program with CM Punk. And CM Punk can turn heel and trace it all back to that night where he just couldn't stand the fact that Cody Rhodes is better than him, and he's willing to do anything it takes to finish his story. And maybe next year's WrestleMania can be Cody Rhodes versus a heel CM Punk who's willing to do anything it takes to finish his own story and main event WrestleMania and win the World Heavyweight Champion, the WWE Championship. That's just me spitballing, but that sounds like some pretty interesting TV and some pretty interesting matches that we could get out of that. Now, I think what we will get is night one of WrestleMania will be Cody Rhodes, or will be CM Punk versus Seth Rollins, and then Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns will main event night two. Now, a lot of people in the wrestling world have been torn over whether or not the night one of WrestleMania main event counts as main eventing WrestleMania. And the reason that's important in regards to CM Punk is a major reason he walked out of WWE 10 years ago is because he never got to main event WrestleMania, and he was champion for a year and a half, and he still never got to main event WrestleMania, and he thought he deserved it, and he always thought he got passed over, like the little kid with no athletic ability who always gets picked last in kickball. And in CM Punk's mind, John Cena and The Rock were always those two kids that everybody picked first, and CM Punk thought that should have been him. And so the reason that matters is if CM Punk, when he talks about finishing his story is that he wants to main event WrestleMania. Cody Rhodes' story revolves around the WWE Championship. CM Punk's story revolves around main eventing WrestleMania. So, if he wrestles Seth Rollins in the night one main event of WrestleMania, then a lot of people might consider that to be the end of his story, and he won't be able to build on that as something that's driving him going forward, and it won't be that big of a deal. So to me, I would say night two is the true main event. And if WWE wants to play it safe, they could just not have Punk and Rollins main event night one either, but I don't see them doing that. So they might shoot themselves in the foot and let CM Punk finish his story the same year Cody Rhodes finishes his, and just give them separate main events to do their thing in. But to me, that would be disappointing because I would love to see it come full circle, build a long-term story next year. Now, as far as CM Punk and Roman Reigns goes, that's a match that has to happen, and that's a match that has a lot of storylines leading into it. For starters, Roman Reigns' manager used to manage CM Punk, so they both got the Paul Heyman connection. CM Punk made reference to that in his promo on Friday. They've also both been the two longest reigning WWE champions in the last 10 years. Or I guess it's been 12 years for Punk now. Time flies. And CM Punk is the reason that Roman Reigns got his start in the WWE in the first place. So those three things, just a lot to build on. And I think that'd be really interesting. So Roman got a start in this group called The Shield 10 years ago. And The Shield made their debut essentially as CM Punk's hired guns that would help him win his championship matches. Backstage, CM Punk actually didn't want Roman Reigns to be in the group, and that was a Vince McMahon decision. But most people don't know that, so they could easily tell that story as CM Punk was the one that brought Roman into the WWE, and now he's going to be the one to take him out. And sometimes things just wrap themselves. But it'll be interesting to see where things go going forward. I'm glad Punk was able to cut the promo on Friday that we have been waiting for since he came back. And with that being said, that's a wrap on this week's episode, and I'll see y'all next time.